In 1938, a fish was pulled out of the Indian Ocean that, according to every scientist alive, should not have existed. It belonged to a family the fossil record said had died out more than 65 million years ago, wiped out in the same disaster that ended the dinosaurs. For all that time, this creature existed only as an impression in stone. Science had, in effect, already held its funeral. And then, one hot December morning, it turned up in a fishing net. Alive. But here is the part almost no one tells you. The story everyone repeats about this fish. That it is a living fossil, a creature frozen in time, our own ancestor that once crawled onto land. Almost none of it is true. This is the real story of the coelacanth. Most people who have heard of the coelacanth know it as the living fossil. The phrase paints a picture of an animal that simply stopped evolving. That the fish hauled up in 1938 was identical to one swimming around 400 million years ago. It gets called a missing link. The fish that became the first land animal. Basically our great-grandfather with fins. It is a wonderful story. It is also wrong on nearly every single point. And to understand what the coelacanth actually is, you have to begin where the world began. On a dock in South Africa, with a young woman who very nearly threw it away. The 22nd of December, 1938. Marjorie Courtney Latimer was the curator of a small museum in East London, South Africa. She was 31 years old, and she ran the place almost single-handedly. She had a standing arrangement with the local trawler crews. If they ever caught anything strange, they were to set it aside for her. That morning, a call came in from Captain Hendrik Goosen. His trawler, the Nareen, had been working the waters near the mouth of the Chalumna River, and the catch had something unusual in it. It was 2 days before Christmas. She almost didn't go. She went anyway. On the deck was a pile of the day's catch: sharks, sponges, seaweed, slime. And underneath it, she caught sight of a fin. She pushed the other fish aside, and what she uncovered stopped her cold. It was about 5 feet long, steel blue, flecked with pale white markings, armored in hard scales. She later said it was the most beautiful fish she had ever seen. But the strangest thing was not the color. It was the fins. They were not the thin, flat fins of an ordinary fish. They were thick and fleshy, set on stubby little stalks. They looked less like fins and more like limbs. And the tail ended in a strange extra lobe. She did not know what she was looking at. No book she owned had anything like it. Marjorie knew she was holding something important. She just didn't know what. And she had a serious problem. It was the peak of a South African summer. The fish was already beginning to spoil. Her museum had no freezer, no cold room, nothing to preserve a 5-foot specimen. She tried to find cold storage in town and was turned away. With the fish deteriorating by the hour and no other option, she made a painful decision. She sent it to a taxidermist to be stuffed. That choice saved the fish's skin, but it meant the insides, the organs, the gills, the skeleton were all lost. Before it left, she did one crucial thing. She made careful notes and a rough sketch, and she sent them to the one person she thought might be able to help, a fish expert named J.L.B. Smith. J.L.B. Smith was a chemistry lecturer by profession, but he was also South Africa's foremost expert on fish. He was away on holiday when Marjorie's letter finally reached him in early January. He unfolded the rough sketch and felt a jolt go through him. The lobed fins, that strange tail. He knew that shape. He had seen it before, but only in one place, in fossils, in rock. It looked impossibly like a coelacanth, a creature that was supposed to have been extinct since the age of the dinosaurs. He could barely let himself believe it. He traveled to East London, and on the 16th of February, 1939, he finally stood in front of the stuffed specimen. He later said the first sight of it hit him like a white-hot blast. There was no doubt left in his mind. It was a true coelacanth. Smith gave the fish a scientific name, Latimeria chalumnae. Latimeria, in honor of Marjorie Courtney Latimer, and Chalumnae, after the Chalumna River where it was caught. Then he announced it to the world. The news detonated. Newspapers across the planet ran the story of a creature older than the dinosaurs, found alive. One headline simply declared that the Loch Ness Monster had been outdone. A single day of public viewing at the museum reportedly drew a crowd of around 20,000 people. For a brief moment, this was the most famous fish on Earth. But J.L.B. Smith was not satisfied, because the only coelacanth specimen in existence had been gutted and stuffed. And a stuffed fish cannot answer the questions that actually matter. Smith needed a second coelacanth, a whole one, an intact specimen he could open up and study, its organs, how it bred, what its body could reveal about the deep history of life. There was just one problem. He had almost no idea where to find one. The 1938 fish could have been a freak, a lone stray, the last of its kind, washed up by accident. So began one of the most stubborn searches in the history of science. Smith, together with his wife Margaret, spent the next 14 years hunting for a living coelacanth along the coast of East Africa. Then the Second World War broke out, and the search ground to a halt. When the war ended, Smith tried a completely different approach. In 1948, he printed thousands of leaflets in English, French, and Portuguese, each one carrying a picture of the coelacanth and a promise. A reward of £100 for anyone who could bring him an intact specimen. That was real money. At the time, roughly half the price of a small car. The leaflets went up all along the East African coast and across its islands. "Look carefully at this fish," they read. "It may bring you good fortune." For 4 more years, nothing came back. And then, at the end of 1952, the phone rang. The call did not come from South Africa. It came from the Comoro Islands, a small volcanic archipelago roughly 2,000 kilometers to the north. On the 20th of December, 1952, a fisherman named Ahmadi Abdallah had been fishing at night off the island of Anjouan. On a simple hand line dropped into deep water, he hauled up something heavy. It was a coelacanth. One of Smith's leaflets had reached the islands, carried there by a sea captain named Eric Hunt. Hunt understood instantly what the fish was. He did his best to preserve it, and he sent an urgent cable to Smith. Smith now faced a desperate race. The fish was on a remote island, and it was beginning to rot. Smith had to reach a remote island fast before the most important fish of his life was lost to decay. So he did something almost unthinkable. He managed to get a message through to the Prime Minister of South Africa himself, Daniel Mallon, and he convinced the head of government to lend him a military aircraft. A South African Air Force plane was scrambled to go and collect a fish. Smith flew out across the Indian Ocean, and on the 29th of December, 1952, he finally laid eyes on a complete, intact coelacanth. After 14 years of searching, this hardened, obsessive scientist reportedly broke down and wept. And here is the part the triumphant version of this story almost always leaves out. When Smith reached the Comoros, he learned something that should have been humbling. The islanders already knew this fish. They had known it for generations. They had a name for it, Gombessa. To them, it was not a miracle and not a ghost. It was just a fish that occasionally came up on the deep lines at night, 2 or 3 a year. They sometimes ate it. Its rough scales were even used like sandpaper. The coelacanth had never been lost. It had never been extinct. It had simply been living somewhere that Western science had never thought to look. And the people who lived there had known it the entire time. Discovery, very often, is just the moment the outside world finally catches up. So now we can go back and take apart the myth. The living fossil. The coelacanth swimming in the ocean today is not the coelacanth of 400 million years ago. The living one belongs to a modern group, Latimeria, that appears nowhere in the fossil record at all. Its ancient relatives were genuinely different animals, different sizes, different shapes, some living in fresh water, an entire vanished family of them. And every living creature, without exception, is under constant pressure from natural selection, the coelacanth included. Yes, it looks broadly similar to its ancient cousins, but looks similar is not the same as frozen in time. The coelacanth has been quietly evolving this whole time, exactly like everything else alive. And then there is the bigger myth, the coelacanth as the missing link, the fish that crawled out of the sea and became us. Now, part of this is rooted in something real. The coelacanth is a lobe-finned fish, and lobe-finned fish are indeed the broad group that eventually gave rise to all land animals, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. The coelacanth even moves its paired fins in an alternating sequence, the very same pattern a four-legged animal uses to walk. But it is not our ancestor. In 2013, scientists sequenced the coelacanth's entire genome, and what they found was that a different creature, the lungfish, is actually closer to land animals than the coelacanth is. The coelacanth is not our great-grandparent. It is a distant cousin, one who looked at dry land and stayed in the water. So what is the coelacanth, really? Not a frozen relic, not a missing link. It is something quieter and, in a way, stranger. It is a deep-sea survivor. It lives down in the dark, in the caves of volcanic slopes, well over 100 meters below the surface, resting in the rock by day, drifting out to hunt at night. It can live for around a century, and it does not even reach adulthood until it is roughly 55 years old. A fish with the lifespan of a human being. And it survived across hundreds of millions of years, not by staying the same, but by retreating into a world so deep, so dark, and so empty that the catastrophes which erased nearly everything else simply passed it by. It outlived the dinosaurs. It outlived the very extinction that should have erased it. And now, after 400 million years, it faces the one threat its long, patient strategy never prepared it for: us. Both species of coelacanth are now endangered, the African one critically so. A fish that survived everything the planet could throw at it may not survive the same century it finally became famous in. It came back from the dead once. Nothing guarantees it does so twice.